Chapter 1. The shadow of the Nile and the scorching sands of ancient Kemet. Death was not an end, but a grand transition. But to cross the threshold, one had to face the most mysterious of all gods. He was not a king of the living, but the master of the silent. He was Anubis, the jackal-headed god. Clad in black and gold, he stood at the edge of the desert, where the sun sets into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. His skin was the color of the fertile Nile mud, symbolizing rebirth, and his eyes held the stillness of 1,000 tombs. Anubis was the first embalmer. When the great king Osiris was betrayed and scattered across the earth, it was Anubis who gathered the pieces. He invented the sacred art of mummification, wrapping the god in linen to preserve his essence forever. He became the opener of the ways, the one who takes the hand of the deceased and leads them through the dark corridors of the afterlife. Chapter 2. The journey through the Duat. The path to the Hall of Two Truths was a nightmare of fire and shadows. The soul had to navigate through 12 gates, each guarded by terrifying demons with names like He Who Dances in Blood or the One Who Eats Filth. Without Anubis, the soul would wander forever, consumed by the chaos of the void. But Anubis carried a golden staff, the scepter, which radiated a pale blue light, cutting through the thick darkness of the underworld. "Fear not the shadows," Anubis would whisper, his voice like the shifting sands of the Sahara. "The darkness only consumes those who have no truth left in their hearts. Follow my footsteps, for I know every grain of sand in this kingdom." Chapter 3. The Hall of Two Truths. Finally, the soul reached a massive chamber of white limestone, carved with millions of glowing hieroglyphs. This was the Hall of Two Truths. At the center stood the Great Scales, a device of divine precision made of solid gold and ebony. Standing next to the scales was Anubis, checking the balance with his long, dark fingers. On one side of the scale, there was nothing yet. On the other side, there was a single, pure white feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. The soul was brought forward. It was time for the negative confession. The person had to stand before 42 divine judges and swear they had never stolen, never lied, and never caused a tear to fall. But words are cheap in the underworld. The gods didn't want to hear the tongue, they wanted to see the weight of the heart. Chapter 4. The heart of the mortal. Anubis stood before the great scales, his jackal head tilted, listening to the vibrations of the soul's truth. In ancient Egypt, the heart was called the IB, the only part of a human that could not lie. It was the witness of every secret, every stolen moment, and every act of kindness. Anubis reached out with his dark, slender fingers and touched the chest of the deceased. With a movement as light as a shadow, he withdrew the heart. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic golden light, or it was heavy and dark, stained by the weight of earthly sins. "The moment of Ma'at has come," Anubis whispered. He placed the heart on the left scale. On the right scale sat the feather of truth. The balance began to sway. The golden chains of the scale creaked in the absolute silence of the Hall of Two Truths. Chapter V. The dweller in the shadows. Ammit. But Anubis and the soul were not alone in the chamber. Crouched at the foot of the scales was a nightmare-given form. This was Ammit, the devourer of the dead. Ammit was a chimera of terror. She had the head of a massive Nile crocodile, the front body of a powerful lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. Her eyes were like molten lava, never blinking, fixed entirely on the heart. She did not hunt, she waited. She was the final executioner. If the heart was even a fraction heavier than the feather, it belonged to her. To be eaten by Ammit was not just death, it was non-existence. The soul would be erased from the universe forever, never to see the sun again, never to reach the fields of peace. Chapter 6. The recording of fate. Thoth. Behind Anubis stood another god, Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the heavens. He held a reed pen and a palette of eternal ink. His task was to record the verdict of the scales into the great book of life. "The balance is shifting," Thoth announced, his voice like the rustle of ancient papyrus. The heart began to sink. The feather trembled. The soul stood frozen, watching as their entire life was reduced to a single vibration on a golden beam. Anubis adjusted the plummet of the scale, his golden eyes reflecting the judgment of the universe. The crocodile jaws of Ammit began to salivate, sensing a feast of a heavy, sinful heart. Chapter 7. The Judgment. The Hall of Two Truths fell silent. The air was heavy with anticipation. the flickering torches casting long shadows on the hieroglyph-covered walls. Anubis held his breath, his dark, slender fingers poised just above the golden scales. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, gripped his reed pen, ready to mark the final verdict in the Book of Life. The heart pulsed one last time. The feather of Ma'at shimmered with the pure white light of cosmic order. Slowly, agonizingly, the scales found their balance. If the heart rose higher than the feather, it meant the soul was pure, lighter than a breath of air. If it sank, heavy with the weight of greed, lies, and murder, it belonged to the waiting beast. The soul, naked of body and worldly possessions, watched its entire existence hang in that moment. The crocodile jaws of Ammit, the devourer, began to slowly open, her eyes glowing with anticipation for a feast of a guilty heart. Chapter 8, the verdict of Ma'at. Anubis released the scales. The golden arm of the balance settled, the heart of the soul was lighter than the feather of Ma'at. A wave of relief, a silent sound of pure cosmic harmony, filled the hall. Thoth swiftly began to write the final words, found true of voice. Worthy of the Fields of Iaru. Anubis turned, no longer the silent judge, but the compassionate guide. Your sins are forgiven, your truth is your passport. The way is open. But what if the heart was heavy? What if the balance tipped down? The feather of Ma'at would fly high. Anubis would step back, his eyes showing no pity, only the cold fact of justice. The heavy heart would remain on the scale for just a moment before Ammit, with a terrifying roar that shook the foundations of the underworld, would lunge forward, snapping her jaws shut on the heart. The soul would cease to exist. Forever. Chapter 9, the Fields of Iaru. For the worthy soul, the journey was over. Anubis led them through the final gate to the Fields of Iaru, the Egyptian paradise. It was a mirror image of the life they had known, but perfect. The Nile flowed with sweet water, the harvests were eternal, and there was no pain, no sorrow, only the eternal son of Osiris. Anubis returned to his hall, ready for the next soul, the next heart, the next judgment. He is the guardian of the threshold, the balance of the scales. His story reminds the mortals of Kemet that it is not the temples you build, or the gold you possess, but the weight of your heart that matters in the end. For even today, in the silence of the desert, Anubis waits, eternally checking the balance of the universe.